The reality is, a 10-year-old kid these days can see more pornography in an afternoon after school than their great grandfather saw in their entire life. But let's also recognize that, what's that, 4 generations? Our brain hasn't evolved to handle that in 4 generations. It's just the technology is moving so fast. You can't hope this takes care of itself. You have to be proactive and you have to educate the kids. And we desperately need parents, young parents, to start doing that if we're going to do anything about these skyrocketing numbers.
Welcome to the Intentional Guy Podcast, where we are driven to help men become more intentional and purposeful in their daily lives. Your host, Michael Chestnut, will interview amazing guests to get insight and glean wisdom from, so we can integrate intentional living and lead happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. All right, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Intentional Guy. I'm thankful for you to be here today. Today, though, we're going to hit a topic that some of you are going to like, some of you are not going to like, some of you are going to think that it's not a problem, some of you know that it's a problem. I believe if you're a parent of a youth with a cell phone, you need to really listen to this conversation today with an open mind, but also as men. As most of you know, I struggled with porn addiction, and I lost everything in my life. I wrote a book several years ago called Exposed that told you about that. If you haven't read it, read it. It starts off with the FBI knocking on my door, and that will get you a wake-up call. And it's taken me 15 years to find restoration from it, and it's been a lot of hard work to get there. And so hopefully today's show will help you from having to go through what I did. So just to prepare you, we're going to be talking about pornography, masturbation, other things like that you might go, but get over it and listen to what has to be said. Okay, I'm here with Joshua Shea today. Joshua is my guest today. Joshua, nice to have you on here. We're hitting a topic that we've only hit one other time, but not as in depth as some of the things I think that we're probably going to talk about today. But Josh, thank you for being here. If you would tell us just a little bit, my audience, a little bit about your background.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for telling the world to get over it. That's what we have to do. We have to be grown-ups and get over it. Far more people statistically use porn than don't, even though far more statistically will lie about it that they don't. So yes, we have to get over it. We have to put on our big girl and big boy pants and talk about this stuff. As I said, my name is Joshua Shea. I was a porn addict for 24 years. I was an alcoholic also for 22 years. Started porn at 12, started alcohol at 14. I then lived a life where I hid my problems by overachieving and by, trying to be the best boss I could be, the best employee I could be. At one point, I was a politician. I started a film festival up here in New England. I was always overachieving, basically to hide the fact that I hated who I was, and it was much easier to play successful characters than it was to successfully be myself. And at the end of the day, when the networking events and dinners and meetings and all of that were over, and I was stuck sitting on my couch, that's when everything happened. That's when everything got bad, because it was just me sitting with Josh, and that was the most uncomfortable feeling in the world. 9.5 years ago, I ended up getting fired from my job, and I ended up having an intervention of sorts and deciding that I could either keep the porn and the alcohol and I would lose everything else, or I could get rid of the porn and alcohol and try to save the life that I had been destroying. not long after I got into, early recovery, I was somebody who was a journalist for most of my professional life. I was a journalist, also an editor. The final position I had was as a publisher of several regional magazines up here in New England. And I went to the bookstore, if you remember what those are. I went to the bookstore and checked the section for self-help, checked the section for addiction, because I'm a research geek. Being a journalist, most of us are. Books on alcoholism, books on general addiction, nothing for pornography addiction. And it dawned on me, you know what I think I'll do? I'll write that book. I'll learn all about this. I'll get the statistics, I'll get the science, and then I'll work in my own story too. So I did that, put out that book, figured that was going to be my one contribution to this world. What happened was that, yeah, I got a few messages from some porn addicts out there who appreciated my book. But what I got was a ton of messages from mothers and girlfriends. And people like, oh my God, you fixed yourself. How do I fix my boyfriend? How do I fix my husband? That's when I was introduced to the world of betrayal trauma, which happens to the partners of porn addicts in many cases, because most male porn addicts are not open about their addiction. Most male porn addicts are hiding it because they know their wives or their girlfriends look at it as cheating. Yeah. And their world gets completely rocked when they find out that their partner has been doing this. So I heard from all these women, and it occurred to me, I should really write the other side of the story too, because I'd never heard of this. I teamed up with a marriage and family therapist out of California, a good friend of mine now named Tony Overbay, and he and I wrote a book about betrayal trauma that became a bestseller. And after that happened, that's when all the podcasts came calling. That's when the radio stations came calling. That's when the speaking opportunities started. So I started to develop this little song and dance act to tell people about pornography addiction. I did the TED Talk. I was doing all that stuff. And then COVID hit. And no longer could I go make money talking about this, because the auditorium was locked because nobody was anywhere. My writing partner Tony, he suggested that I get certified as a coach. He said, "You already know more than most therapists do. Uh-huh. So, and you've got your story, which is fantastic. Why don't you become a coach and help people? And you can still make some money. You can stay in this field while the pandemic is happening." So I did this, and lo and behold, it turns out I actually like working one-on-one with people far more than I like standing in front of a crowd talking. And if you know me, I love standing in front of crowds and talking. So it just blew my mind how much I loved this, how it felt like a calling. I don't know what it feels like to be called to God or called to the cloth. I've heard about, a lot of religious men who talk about that. I feel like this is my calling. I feel like between learning how to ask questions as a journalist, between going through it as an addict, between having a couple sales jobs in my life and learning how to get ideas and marketing across to people, all of my life has really been led right to here, where I think, and lo and behold, boom, this explosion of pornography addiction, first because of high-speed internet, then kind of a second wave now because of the pandemic. And there was this industry that wasn't there 20 years ago that, being a coach, you can make a living, and I make a living, and I help a lot of people every day. And it's my calling. It's absolutely wonderful now.
I identify with you. I just did the same thing. I just got my certification in coaching so that I can do the same thing. I meet on Thursday nights, with a group of men who are addicted to porn. And it's been a joy to be able to give back and to help other guys who are going through this, and it's a real thing. And this is where I want to get with today with you, because I don't think a lot of people get it, understand it, because one, I hear this a lot. Not my kid. My kid's not watching porn.
Yes,
We
yes.
give
You,
them
you
a
have
cell
you have
phone.
that unique and beautiful snowflake. Lucky you.
Yes, and great if your kid isn't, right? But my theory is this: if your kid's not, could he? Because we're setting them up for failure when we hand them a phone with no education on it or without blockers.
It's
And
not a
and, and
matter of it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
correct. So um, today I really want to take a moment and educate people. And what I'm going to ask my listeners to do is to have an open mind, because a lot of times we just shut down and we don't think about this. But I want you to hear the statistics about uh, pornography addiction and how it happens. And it happens in isolation, happens alone. And then one of the things, I don't know if you've experienced this, is men who are addicted to pornography become great liars.
Amazing liars,
Yeah.
manipulators, gaslighters.
Yes.
And why? It's not that we become this, it's that we are this because we did it to ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
practiced on ourselves and got really good at it.
Yeah.
And then spewed our venom out to the world.
And people
And
don't realize pornography is progressive. And so we will tell ourselves, well, I won't do this.
right.
And then we say, I won't do this. But it's progressive. And then next thing you know, you're out there with a prostitute or something that you said you never would ever do, because pornography is so progressive, just like any other drug. It gets to where this is not enough. This is not enough. I got to get more. I've got to get more.
Well, and what we have to do, I think what parents have to do is accept the fact that they are not outliers. I know you have a very unique life. Everybody thinks they do. I know you have a very unique story. Everybody thinks they do. But these statistics come from somewhere. And you have to basically radically accept that this is part of our society now.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell parents two things right up front. First, to get their attention, I say, I grew up in a world of Playboy magazine. I grew up in a world of hoping I could get a videotape. It was very limited compared to these days. These days, any 11-year-old who can type the words man, sex, and goat into a computer can see some pretty extreme stuff that when I was 12 or 13, I wouldn't even know where to go find it.
Yeah. And
that's the world we're living in. And it's delivering day after day after day after day. That's the first thing that I'd make parents recognize is any kid can find this with any
and they
access
may find
to
it
the
on
internet.
accident. Here's the problem. Yes, your young boy may not go looking for it, but then innocently there's something that a pop up or a whatever, they come across something accidentally, and then you can't
Because dad
unsee
was
what
using the
you've
computer
seen.
earlier.
Right. And now they're, oh, what's that? And then we go down a rabbit hole.
Right. And we have to understand, though, and this is one thing that, is important to recognize, is that sexuality isn't a bad thing. And being curious about sexuality is an absolutely normal thing. And we shouldn't shame that, and we shouldn't embarrass people over it. We should expect it to happen, especially in the years leading up to and during puberty.
I remember my mom asked my dad to talk to me about the birds and the bees, but my dad was a Baptist preacher. And my dad, first off, I don't think he was equipped to really talk to me about it,
Mm-hmm.
And so he told me the birds stink. The birds go chirp, chirp. The bees go buzz, buzz. The birds will poop on you and the bees will sting you. That was my birds and the bees talk. Okay. Because he did.
He's a man who knows his National Geographic.
He does. And so he didn't want to do that. But what happened to me was, and my family didn't realize this later until my book came out 3 years ago, I was sexually assaulted by someone,
Mm-hmm. Same.
because I didn't, and then I never felt like I could go to my parents about it because they were so embarrassed to talk about things like that that I dare not. And so there was a culture of um, not being able to go. So I dealt with this for 30 plus years, Joshua, and I had failed marriages. I got into pornography. I didn't understand why I was doing the things that I was doing until I got therapy over it. And I realized I was acting out from the sexual trauma from back when I was a kid, you know, and not
Absolutely.
saying that everybody that watches porn was sexually abused, but
Nope. About,
there
about
are
80% of American men
do what?
who watch, about 80% of American men, at least according to Patrick Carn's study that is now 15, 20 years old, but around 80% of men carry some kind of trauma from sexual abuse when they were young.
Can you imagine what that is today? I think
No,
I heard it was
his
one in
study
five
his
are
study showed 70% of men who were porn addicts or intercourse addicts. I hate the term sex addict. Porn addict
you
or
know what?
intercourse addict.
I'm glad you said it because I feel like when I say I'm a porn addict, I undermined what my what I did. I was addicted to sex, you know.
Yeah.
I was looking
Well,
for something to fulfill something. Um, the hurt, really, the hurt that I
well,
had in my life.
that's one of the things that I also try to get across to parents or even any of my clients when I first talk to them is listen, at the core, you are not addicted to porn. What you're addicted to is the good feeling that porn gives you.
The dopamines and
When I was 12 years old, I wasn't getting let into a bar, so I wasn't going to start drinking then. I wasn't being let into a casino. I wasn't going to start a gambling addiction. I grew up in a neighborhood where I didn't know where to go get hard drugs. What else was I going to get addicted to? And and the case with me was very much sexual trauma and some emotional trauma at the hands of my grandmother. The emotional trauma, the sexual trauma was a babysitter, but that's exactly what it was. You're addicted to the feeling it gives you, to the relief it gives you. And you discover this usually at a young age, and you were not taught or developed proper coping skills, proper survival skills. So you do what you do, you survive, and you learn that this is something that makes life a little bit better. Porn, you learn, you teach yourself, can make a bad day okay and can make an okay day pretty good. And you keep doing this thinking nothing's really wrong. You know you can't tell people about it because dirty pictures and you don't want people to know about that. But you just move forward until the day you realize, oh my God, I can't stop this.
yeah.
I can't
Well,
stop
and it
this.
has a stigma to it too. So a lot of us we don't want to go get help because I mean I've heard guys say I wish I would. I would rather tell you I'm an alcoholic or a drug addict than to tell you that I'm a sex addict.
I when I do my presentations, I make a joke because one of the things of doing presentations about porn, you've got to come at it really light at first,
Right.
so everybody gets comfortable. And one of the jokes I would make was that when like I said, I was an alcoholic as well. I first went off to rehab for alcoholism. And you tell people I'm going off to fight my alcoholism. They pat you on the back. They call you a hero. They want to shake your hand. And you say, "Well, now I'm going to rehab for porn addiction." They don't want to shake your hand. They go running for the hand sanitizer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reality is, post-pandemic, the new set of statistics out there. Post-pandemic, 91.5% of men who use the internet look at porn at least once a month. 60.2% of women who use the internet look at porn at least once a month. Doesn't mean they're all addicts, most aren't. But we are in a society where most of us, about 75% of us, are looking at porn at least once a month. And what we have to do is just accept that And what I always tell people, we can have long conversations about pornography and never have them go above a PG rating. You don't need to talk about what you see in it. You don't need to talk about the gory details. You just need to recognize it's out there, and what are you going to do about it? What is your relationship going to do about it? And like you alluded to earlier, we need to educate, not bury our heads in the sand and just hope it doesn't hit our kids, because great, you put a blocker on the phone. What you locked down 1 out of 7 billion phones in this world. Good job. You almost handled it single-handedly.
Yeah.
What happens when little Johnny shows your son or shows your daughter the latest crap from some porn site on his phone because his parents didn't put blockers on their phone? Do you know what your kid is going to say? Do you know what your kid is going to do? If you don't, you haven't porn proofed your kid whatsoever. And even worse, you haven't prepared them for seeing this kind of stuff, because this is the world we live in now. We see this kind of stuff is out there. Your kid is going to see it. My father tells stories of the 1950s of having to do air raid drills in school because of the Russians were going to bomb us. Well, we don't do that anymore. Go 100 years earlier. There was no refrigeration. Where I'm from in New England was the capital of the world in ice harvesting. Then refrigeration came along and killed an industry. The world changes. And about 22, 23 years ago, we went from that crazy dial-up modem sound to nothing because we went wireless and high speed. And with high speed internet, it's delivering this imagery at rates we never could have imagined. The reality is, a 10-year-old kid these days can see more pornography in an afternoon after school than their great-grandfather saw in their entire life. But let's also recognize that, 4 generations? Our brain hasn't evolved to handle that in 4 generations. It's just that technology is moving so fast, you can't hope this takes care of itself. You have to be proactive, and you have to educate the kids. And we desperately need parents, young parents, to start doing that if we're going to do anything about these skyrocketing numbers.
Yeah, I think I'm going to call this episode "Porn Hurt." That was my handle after everything happened, when my world fell apart. I forget the name of the site. I think there was Triple X Church. There really wasn't a lot of platforms out there at that time to help you. And if there was, it was like expensive to get a part of it.
Very expensive. And a lot of them were T-shirt and bumper sticker companies, first and foremost.
Yes. And so my online handle became Porn Hurt, because that's where my identity lied in it, because it had really ruined. I lost everything. I went from Indiana, moved here to where my parents were after losing my wife and child. And I got off the plane with only the shirt and pants and shoes that I was wearing, and literally had to start life all over again. But let me tell you, the shame and the guilt that I carried for over a decade from this kept me from being able to really move forward. It really paralyzed me, And the thing I hated the most watching porn, or being around it because of what it did in my life, I would find myself several times going back to it because I hurt so bad that I wanted something to make me feel better, because the hurt was so overwhelming.
And that's where
it took me to get therapy eventually. So many years later, I wish I would have got it. I got therapy for everything but the porn addiction part. I got it for the depression and for, the suicidal ideation and all this stuff, right? But I couldn't open up about what I was seeing, right? And I come at this as a minister. All right. So as a minister, were the shame and guilt, and everyone watch out when I tell you this, okay? Because I may lose some followers, was same-sex addiction. And that's what had me, because I kept going back to my child abuse.
Yeah.
And it's weird that I was attracted to the porn that was the pornography that ended up being what started all of this, right?
It normalized it.
Yeah.
It
And I
normalized
didn't
it.
have healthy relationships. I had 2 failed marriages. And now I realize it was because I didn't know how, because my first relationship was with this adult man that abused me as a child, and it skewed my whole thinking of relationships. Go figure.
Absolutely. And that's, you carry that with you. I mean, that is some rough stuff to carry with you. Like, my situation was that it was a female babysitter, and there was also some sketchy stuff happened with her older teenage daughter. But like I said, I remember the first time that I saw pornography. I was 12 years old. My older cousin, to show he was cool, showed me some magazines he stole. And I remember looking on that page of whatever the adult magazine was. It was very graphic. And it didn't take me time to develop into a porn addict. I was a porn addict the second I saw it. Because, like I said, it's a glossy magazine. And look at what these people are doing. And this is what happened to me not too long ago. Well, they're on a tennis court doing this. It must be okay.
Right.
And so you tell yourself this story that it's okay. And in my case, I actually think I used so much porn when I was young that helped me repress those memories. Because when I got into the actual therapy part of things, I knew something a little bit strange happened at my babysitter's house. I knew I didn't like the place. I knew, when my mother told me when I was about 22 years old that my babysitter died, my mom says, I smiled. I don't remember that, but I did. Yeah. And it wasn't until I sat with a professional who knew the questions to ask, who knew how to get me there, that I could recognize, oh my God, there is a straight line from the abuse that happened to me to how I handled it.
Yep. Oh, me too. Me too. And I was amazed. And after I dealt with it in therapy, it was amazing how quickly I could start recovering from it. Yeah. Once I put light on all the things I didn't want anyone to know about, and the fear I had of the stigma of it and all that, once I was able to release that, it was like a weight came off of me. But I also was able to deal with it so much better now and healthier because they helped educate me on it. They helped me understand why I was acting the way that I was acting, why I was doing the thing. Not that changes all those broken relationships and all those other things. You talk about what is it with spouses and stuff that are
betrayal trauma.
I mean, my poor ex-wife, the betrayal trauma that she has, because the FBI showed up at our door,
that's not what she signed up to when she said, I do. That's the last thing she ever thought would happen.
And to this day, she won't talk to me. I won't say she hates me. I can't speak for her. I don't know. But, I don't blame her, because the betrayal was like none she's probably ever had before. Right.
Right.
And I lost my daughter over it. I haven't talked to my daughter. And it breaks my heart. But that's the consequences to the things that took place. And those, time hopefully will heal that.
Well,
and
and
hopefully they get
hopefully they
therapy.
get the help that they need.
Right.
Because the way that when I talk to my clients about betrayal trauma, there's this sense of injustice.
Yeah.
There's this sense of, I didn't sign up for this. And what the way that I talk about this and get a 98% of the time a lady, the way that I get a lady to understand it is that let's imagine that you and your husband were driving down the road and he is driving carelessly, too fast, whatever. He careens the car, goes off a cliff, flips a few times. The medics come, they cut you out of the car. He walks away. Your legs are mangled. Whose fault is it? It's his. But you still have to go get the operations. You're the one that has to get the pins in your leg. You're the one that has to do the physical therapy. You do have a responsibility to yourself to heal yourself. And I do hope that your ex-wife, I do hope that your daughter will get the help that they recognize or that they need, because I think one of the most important things is for them to be in a good headspace. And that's what I tell all of my clients half of my practice is betrayal trauma at this point. And it's like, yes, you did not cause this. Yes, this is not your fault. Yes, the world is quite often an unfair and unjust place. That doesn't mean that you can just throw up your hands and wish it to be different, because it's not. Sometimes you have to do the heavy lifting. Sometimes you have to be the one that does the work. And a lot of women and a lot of people who feel betrayed feel like because they're not the root of the problem, they don't have a responsibility to fix it. They're waiting for that bolt of lightning that changes. And I tell people, both addicts and people with betrayal trauma, we make our decisions in life. And what you have to ultimately decide is, can I forgive? And if you decide you can forgive, you forgive, but you don't forget. Yeah. And you decide to take a leap of faith and you trust. That's what you have to do if you're going to heal from this as a partner. And it's kind of the same thing as an addict. You have to ultimately make the decision that you're going to heal. The number one thing you need is the willpower, whatever shape that takes.
Yep.
But it's the willpower to see it through at all costs.
And you have to understand the consequences are real. For my ex, she may have actually gone through therapy and got all that taken care of, but it doesn't mean that they are ready to want to have anything to do with you.
Right. Maybe she's forgiven you in her heart, but that doesn't mean she's going to do it to your face.
Correct. Because the betrayal, and especially in our situation, was just so huge.
Yeah.
So huge. The damage I caused was so huge. Josh, I want to move on, and people, this is going to be a little touchy, but as parents, I want you to hear this, okay? Because there's a lot of people that don't understand this, and I want to talk about young kids. Why we used to come back when I was a kid, and a boy saw porn, or saw it went. We had to go through a cornfield where the farmer had his stash. That's where I saw my first pornography, right? But we had to work really hard to get to it. And the saying was, boys will be boys, thing. Today, we got to get past that boys will be boys thing, because our boys are becoming very damaged. And what's happened is, and I can't articulate this as well as you're going to be able to, so I'm going to ask you to do this. But I want you to tell our parents and our listeners the amount of how this is impotent men, how we are producing impotent men because of pornography and that word masturbation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we have to recognize is, yes, you had to go through a cornfield. I had to find a video store that was failing because Blockbuster was killing it, and they needed my $2 to rent the movies when I was 13 years old. We had to work at it when we were young, and now we give every 11-year-old the greatest porn computer ever invented with the smartphone. And good luck. Call us if you need something. Meanwhile, they've got every piece of pornography ever created in the history of mankind at their fingertips. And what we need to understand is the science of this. The first part, like I mentioned, my great grandfather probably didn't see as much porn in his life as I saw in one day. And what we know is that the brain has not evolved that much. The brain does not recognize, while our eyes recognize it, the brain does not always recognize a color image from a black and white image. The brain doesn't always recognize a moving picture from a still picture. The brain doesn't always recognize somebody in front of you versus somebody on a screen versus somebody on a page. It all kind of blends together. So let's put that science off to the side. We understand the brain does not do as good a job processing imagery as we believe. Next, let's look at pornography and how it's being poured in nonstop. I mean, I recently read that one of the top adult websites in the world, if you started to watch the pornography that they have on hand and worked your way backward in time, looking at everything they had 24/7, you would not finish watching what they had until around the beginning of the Civil War. So they're on this one site, 24/7, hundreds of years of pornography. It's endless what people can see. We understand how brain chemicals work, especially in the pleasure centers. We're talking about dopamine's the big one everybody talks about, but we're talking about oxytocin. We're talking about serotonin. We're talking about endorphins. We understand that these are the things that get excited when pornography is seen, or when somebody's gambling or playing the video games or whatever it is that they are susceptible to. Those levels increase. But it's just like being an alcoholic who needs to drink more or needs to drink harder stuff to feel the same high.
Yeah.
So we keep watching more. We keep watching more. The duration gets longer, or the content gets more extreme. We need these novel images and these new images, because new imagery is the strongest, most powerful imagery. It's been studied in a couple of different species of animals, this phenomenon known as the Coolidge effect. And what this shows, for instance, it was done with rats. You put a male rat and a female rat together, they have lots and lots of intercourse. Eventually it starts to slow down. Eventually the male doesn't really care anymore. So you remove that female rat, you put in a new female rat, it starts all over again. He is ready for more because the new imagery, the new rat got his engine running again. So since we know the brain doesn't process imagery well, we've got our young boys and young girls. I'm seeing more women as porn addicts than I ever have before in my practice. The imagery on a screen, well, I can see whatever I want. Whatever crazy thing I can think up, push a button. Oh, well, this isn't entertaining me. Push a button. Well, this isn't entertaining me. Push a button, push a button, push a button. And it's always new stuff. People do not generally use the same pornography twice. However, there's the girlfriend. There's the wife. Well, you've seen them naked plenty of times. You've probably had relations with them plenty of times. The brain doesn't really see the difference between that and what it sees on the screen. And much like that rat, who the male is not interested in anymore, the male human is just going to, oh, I've seen this. I've seen your breasts 100 times. I know what it's like with you. I know how that movie ends. And because they're not stimulated, they can't get stimulated down there. And that's what's called and what's known as porn-induced erectile dysfunction. And this is running rampant. Right when I was 20 years old, the rates of erectile dysfunction among men who were 20 was between 2 and 4%. Because lots of things can cause erectile dysfunction. It's a symptom of plenty of things. However, the most recent rates of erectile dysfunction that I saw, depending on which survey, which study it was, are somewhere between 18 and 22%. So just in 25 years, we have seen this exponential explosion with porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Why? Because they're not getting properly excited because they've drowned their pleasure receptors with all of this porn, new porn, new porn, new porn. One of the questions I ask to spot a porn addict almost immediately is, hey, when you're looking at porn, does your session last too long because you're looking for that perfect piece to finish with? Are you always hunting for that one piece that's just going to give you a little more dopamine and that's going to be the grand finale? And yeah, it's like you're looking for that perfect new image. And you know what? Your girlfriend.
I could chase it for hours. I could chase it.
Your girlfriend, your wife. You've seen that before. So you are just physically unable to get an erection because your brain is like, we want more hardcore stuff. That's the stuff that gets the chemicals going. That's the stuff that makes us excited. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing, especially among guys 19, 20, 21 years old. Men who cannot achieve erections with real life women because they're so hooked on pornography and the new imagery that it provides every time they sit down to look at it.
Yep. Well, let's be honest. I mean, so one of the biggest problems with husbands that are watching pornography, they quit chasing their wife because they're chasing pornography all day, right? Yeah. And then they're masturbating. If you're watching pornography, you're masturbating, and so you're having your self pleasure there. That then you're not even chasing your wife anymore, and then you want to know why there's a disconnect. Well, a lot of guys will go, well, we didn't have a sex life. Well, it wasn't not having a sex life. You didn't have an intimacy life, right, because you were chasing pornography. But then you got all these boys, these young boys, who their first sexual experience is pornography and masturbation. Mm-hmm. And then they're spending hours upon hours doing this, that then they think the cure, and it's funny because I've dealt with some men like this. They thought the cure to this was to get married, right? And thought that they would have a sexual partner and this will take care of this, to find out that didn't help, and that they were still more addicted to the pornography than they were to their wife. And then they want to add it to their, people are wanting to add pornography to their marriage to spice it up. And then what's happening, and I don't know if you're experiencing this, is that the marriages are falling apart.
Statistically, marriages that introduce pornography to spice things up end twice as often as ones that don't. And a study or a survey of divorce lawyers from a couple years ago showed that in over half of divorce cases, pornography is mentioned these days.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
No,
and the thing is, I feel like this is the best kept secret because nobody wants to really discuss this. And then if we do discuss it, everybody wants to make a joke out of it, because if we're uncomfortable talking about something, let's laugh about it. That way, then
right,
it makes it a little better. But we need to have these serious talks, because we're losing our marriages over it, but we're losing our sons and daughters over it. And that's, I want to ask you a question here, Josh, because we're hitting a lot of time here, but this is so important to talk about. parents that are listening to this, what are some of the signs that they can look for to see if their child is addicted to porn or has maybe an issue with it? We have signs for when kids are on drugs and alcohol that you can look for. Is there any signs that you can look for as a parent for this?
Well, I mean, you can look at, and the thing is, it could always be something else, but look for signs of isolation. Look for your son or daughter spending extra time in the bathroom, or gee, they went from taking 15-minute showers to taking hour-long showers. Um, Look for them not to be hanging out with friends as much, or not doing what activities that were once pleasurable, because they now stay at home and use pornography. Look at them as far as how they're relating to other people. Are they looking at other people as just a sack of body parts, and not the full person? But, and I say this straight up to parents, you're the parent. It's your job to educate. And this is not the birds and the bees speech. It really isn't. You don't have to talk about how babies are made when you talk about pornography. You can talk about pornography starting at a young age without ever saying the P word. You can simply, you know what? When they're 5 years old, you're not ever to let anybody take a picture of you without your clothes on. And you're not allowed to take pictures of anybody without their clothes on. Okay, thanks. Now let's work on holding a fork. Let's work on crossing the street. I think when a child goes off to school, it's completely okay to say to them, hey, some of your friends at school, maybe on a phone or their tablet, you may see some pictures of naked people, naked grown-ups on there. Kids aren't supposed to see this, just like kids aren't supposed to drink beer and kids aren't supposed to smoke cigarettes. Kids aren't supposed to see this. It can be bad for you. So if you see that, tell a teacher or come tell me, because we want to make sure that you're safe. And then when they become 10, 11, 12 and puberty's around the corner, don't fool yourself into thinking they're never going to look. Have a conversation that doesn't include shame, that doesn't make them feel like they have three heads if they're interested in looking at that. We can go back to cave paintings. Since you could draw on a cave wall with charcoal, there have been depictions of sexuality. Go to any museum or art, or history museum or art gallery, and you will see, ancient and medieval pottery with some pretty X-rated stuff on it. It's part of growing. You don't want to hinder that, but you don't want to attach all this shame. You want to make it open. And you can say, when you're older, you can decide for yourself if you want to look at this stuff. But it's not good for younger people. And I truly believe if we would tell our 12-year-old boys, 6th grade, tell them about porn-induced erectile dysfunction, tell them that, guess what? If you look at too much of this stuff, essentially your penis can break. I think that's going to scare a lot of them straight. Because at 12 years old, most of them aren't looking to have sex. They just want a girlfriend. They want someone's hand to hold. Maybe they want to get their first kiss. They're not looking to jump into bed, but if this is all they have to look at, that's what they'll look at. So we have to teach them. We have to educate them, not scare them. We've had generations of trying to scare the sexuality out of people. It doesn't work. So maybe, and now we've got this technology that, I'm sorry, this stuff's never going to be banned. This stuff's never going to be not there. We tried to ban alcohol in America 100 years ago, didn't work. Certainly isn't going to work for pornography now in this digital age. So the best thing we can do is to educate.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to educate too, because let's be honest, put the ED aside, put aside the imagery that's not, where their brains are not developed enough to deal with this, put all that stuff aside, which are very important. The amount of predators who are out there seeking our kids too, they're normalizing this, they're tricking them, they're grooming them, and that's what happened with our son. Our son was sexually abused, and that's when I ended up having to deal with what happened to me because, and man, I wish I would have, had I dealt with that at a younger age, could I have prepared him for
But
that not to have
that's
happened
not the
to him?
world we lived in, unfortunately. And as I tell people when I sit with them, one of the first things I say is, we're not here to tear your parents down. Because
No.
here's the thing, your parents probably didn't have the tools and skills to be the parent you needed.
My dad wasn't equipped to have that
Yeah,
conversation with me. He
it's not
I
his
don't blame
fault.
him. He
Yeah,
just didn't was not equipped to do that. But if we don't, we're in a different era now too, where because I believe the internet has created more pedophilers. I believe that, it takes you down these dark roads, but it puts our kids in these positions of vulnerability now as well.
absolutely.
And, there's way too many aspects to get into this in one episode. But you said it, it's our job to be the parent and to really deal with them. And if you're a man, let's say you're a man, young man, older man, and you have a pornography addiction, take the shame and guilt away from this. You're not alone.
No,
You know,
exactly.
you're not alone, and it's never too late to seek help, but get the right help. Pensacola is really bad. I had a friend, a man who went to him and his wife went to a therapist who's supposed to be very well known here, and she told him, she told her to get out of him to get out of our group. That there's no such thing as a sex addict or a pornography addiction, and just
If
guard.
you're looking for help, Florida and Texas are not the two places to be.
So, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to get my certification in sex coaching as well, because there's just not the availability here. Plus, I know that. But the thing is this: get the right help. Reach out here. I'm going to put your information in the link too. Let us help you find the right people to talk to. Second of all, that I like to do before we close is just parents, be parents. We can't be embarrassed about this topic. Our kids, your kids, need you to be parents and educate them on this. And if you're not educated on this, get educated with it. Don't be afraid to say words that that it's embarrassing to have that. Well, let me tell you something. I would have much rather been embarrassed having this conversation with my son than for him to be molested by a good friend of our family, because we didn't prepare him for that.
And your job is not to be your child's friend. If you're paying, not even if you're paying, but if you're paying for your child's phone.
Yes. Look at it. Yeah. Right.
But the reality is that's going to usually tell you what you need to know. And if you find something really damning, at least you can address it.
Yeah.
Versus not knowing, and oh my God, are they going to, am I number one, afraid of what I'm going to find? Or am I number two, not going to know how to handle what I find? So I'm just not going to do it. That's not the kind of
can't put our heads in the sand anymore.
Kids today, with the technology we have, that's not the kind of parenting that they need.
Yeah. And the boys will be boys is just damning our kids to a horrible future.
Yeah. So, and girls will be girls, and men will be men, and women will be women. And there is a natural interest in seeing depictions of sexuality. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's just the way that it is. But we need to now understand, because of high-speed internet, because of access, because of the money that's in this industry, it's easier than ever. So education is going to have to be part of it. Yes, it stinks in, the 21st century. We have to do this, but it's what we have to do.
It is. Joshua, listen, we're running out of time. I really appreciate you being on here. I would love to have you again, just because there's just so much to hit that we're not, but this is the first time that we really hit it on my show. So I'm curious to how the response is. And I'm going to ask you guys, respond to this. Give us your insight on what you think about this topic. This is sometimes we have to hit the hard topics. And tonight we're hitting a hard topic, but one that my life was ruined. I had a majority of my life was ruined because I never dealt with that trauma. And so if you're one of those people, reach out, let us get you in the right direction and help. So Joshua, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. Until next time.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I've enjoyed this conversation very much.
It's been great. Until next time, guys, just keep being intentional. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Intentional Guy Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and got some real value out of it. Tell others what you learned and share the podcast if you think they would benefit from it too. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review, and consider checking out our website, intentionalguy.org, to learn more about us and get in touch. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.